In the early hours of Sunday, August 17, 2025, tragedy struck the Crown Heights neighborhood of Brooklyn when a mass shooting at the Taste of the City Lounge left 3 men dead and 8 others wounded. The violence erupted shortly after 3:30 a.m. inside the popular bar and hookah spot located at 903 Franklin Avenue, turning what began as a lively summer night of music, drinks, and socializing into a scene of chaos and devastation. According to police, the deadly gunfire followed a dispute inside the crowded establishment that escalated beyond control. Multiple shooters are believed to have been involved, unleashing dozens of bullets in rapid succession. Responding officers recovered at least 36 shell casings inside the building, a grim sign of the scale of the attack. Authorities also discovered a firearm nearby, though it remains unclear whether it was connected to the assault. Witnesses described a terrifying rush of panic as people tried to escape the enclosed space once shots rang out. Many threw themselves to the ground or ducked behind furniture, while others ran for the exits, tripping and stumbling in the scramble. Police and emergency services arrived within minutes after 911 calls flooded in, but by then 3 men had already lost their lives. The victims included a 27-year-old, a 35-year-old, and another man whose age has not yet been released. 8 additional people, 5 men and 3 women ranging in age from 27 to 61, were rushed to nearby hospitals with gunshot wounds. Fortunately, doctors reported that all of the survivors' injuries were non-life-threatening, though several required surgery and extended medical care. The deaths of 3 young men, however, weighed heavily on the community, which awoke Sunday morning to find its streets cordoned off with police tape and detectives canvassing for evidence. Investigators have not yet arrested any suspects, but they remain confident that more than one gunman was involved. Surveillance footage from inside the lounge and cameras along Franklin Avenue are being reviewed frame by frame. Detectives are also interviewing witnesses who managed to flee and urging members of the public to share any tips that could help identify those responsible. The police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, condemned the attack in strong terms, calling it a terrible act of violence that shattered what has otherwise been a year of record-low shootings across New York City. She emphasized that the incident appears to be an anomaly rather than a trend, though she promised that the department would devote every available resource to tracking down the suspects and ensuring accountability. Yet, despite reassurances, the event has reignited concerns about safety in nightlife venues, particularly in neighborhoods like Crown Heights where rapid gentrification and cultural shifts have sometimes coincided with tensions. Taste of the City Lounge has been a popular local spot for American and Caribbean food, hookah, and live DJs, often drawing a large and diverse crowd late into the night. But this is not the first time violence has erupted there. In November 2024, a non-fatal shooting occurred at the same lounge, raising questions about its security measures and prompting some community members to voice unease about the clientele it attracts. Residents living nearby said they were not entirely surprised to hear about the mass shooting, noting that the establishment has a reputation for late-night disputes spilling into the street. One neighbor recalled nights of loud shouting and fights outside the bar, remarking that the tragedy felt like a disaster waiting to happen. Others, however, stressed that the vast majority of evenings at the lounge had been safe and enjoyable, and they argued that the broader problem is the city's ongoing struggle with gun access rather than the venue itself. Nationally, the incident adds to an alarming tally of mass shootings across the United States. By mid-August 2025, there have been over 270 such events, defined as incidents in which 4 or more people are killed or injured by gunfire. This averages out to more than 1 mass shooting every single day, a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched gun violence remains in American life. Advocates for stricter gun control have seized on the Brooklyn shooting as another painful example of why federal legislation is urgently needed, while opponents argue that tougher local enforcement and community intervention programs would be more effective than sweeping national reforms. For residents of Crown Heights, however, such debates feel secondary to the immediate grief and fear left in the wake of the attack. Candlelight vigils are already being planned for the victims, and families are preparing to mourn their loved ones. The names of the deceased have not yet been officially released pending notification of relatives, but friends on social media have begun sharing tributes to young men they describe as kind, hardworking, and undeserving of such a senseless fate. For the survivors, the physical wounds will eventually heal, but the psychological scars of surviving a hail of bullets in a place meant for leisure will take far longer to fade. The police investigation will continue in the coming days as detectives analyze ballistic evidence, trace the recovered firearm, and determine whether the attack was premeditated or a spontaneous eruption of anger during the dispute. One of the central mysteries investigators hope to resolve is whether the shooters had prior connections to one another or to the victims, or if the violence stemmed from an argument that escalated unpredictably. The lounge's management has not yet issued a public statement, though city officials will likely review whether the establishment should face disciplinary action, fines, or even potential closure given its history. At the same time, community leaders are calling for calm and unity, stressing that the actions of a few violent individuals should not be allowed to divide a neighborhood that has long prided itself on cultural vibrancy and resilience. Crown Heights has been through its share of struggles in the past, from racial tensions to economic decline, yet in recent years it has flourished as new businesses, cafes, and cultural institutions have drawn in a mix of old and new residents. That progress now risks being overshadowed by the bloodshed of Sunday morning. For New York City as a whole, the tragedy presents a complex challenge. On the one hand, overall crime statistics show a downward trend, with shootings and murders at their lowest levels in decades. On the other hand, the sheer unpredictability and brutality of incidents like this one erode the sense of safety that such numbers are meant to convey. It is one thing to know crime rates are falling, it is another to witness 3 lives cut short in an instant in a neighborhood bar. Officials acknowledge that while the city has made enormous strides, the persistence of guns in circulation means that one dispute can still escalate into mass carnage with devastating speed. Mayor Eric Adams has pledged continued investment in anti-violence initiatives, community programs, and police operations targeting illegal firearms. Whether those measures will be enough to prevent the next tragedy remains an open question. As of now, the suspects remain at large, the victims' families are grieving, and an entire community is left reeling from the shock. What was meant to be a night of music, laughter, and togetherness ended with ambulances racing through the streets, police tape blocking sidewalks, and bullet holes marring the walls of a neighborhood lounge. The story of this shooting will undoubtedly fuel conversations far beyond Brooklyn, becoming another chapter in America's long and painful struggle with gun violence. But for those who live on Franklin Avenue, the pain is deeply personal. They will wake up each morning to reminders of what happened in their own backyard, and they will carry the memory of the lives lost long after national headlines move on. Until the shooters are caught and justice is served, unease will linger, mingling with grief and outrage. And even once arrests are made, the central tragedy will remain: 3 young men with futures ahead of them gone forever, 8 others injured, and an entire community left to pick up the pieces of a night that should never have ended this way.